In a freezing night, a poor young woman sat by the fire trying to keep warm, when suddenly she heard cries for help outside. At first, she didn't want to open the door, but when she saw a man covered in snow and a sick-looking child clinging to his side, her heart just couldn't turn them away. She brought them inside, gave them food and shelter from the storm. What she didn't know was that this desperate stranger was a billionaire, and that one act of kindness would change her life forever. Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. The wind outside screamed like something alive, clawing at the thin windows of the old cabin. Every gust made the wooden walls tremble. Inside, Kesha huddled close to the fireplace, rubbing her hands together to chase away the cold that never seemed to leave these days. With the storm rising and the power already flickering, she had been preparing for a long, lonely night. Then, bang, bang, bang. The pounding on the door came out of nowhere, sharp enough to make her drop the firewood she was holding. She froze, mid-breath. Out here in the rural backwoods, people didn't just show up unannounced, especially not during a blizzard. The pounding came again, louder, urgent, desperate. "Please!" a man's voice shouted over the storm. "Please! Somebody help us!" Kesha's heart thudded painfully. A man, at night, in a storm. Every instinct she had screamed danger. She snatched the iron poker from beside the fireplace, gripping it so tightly her knuckles went white. No, not again," she whispered. Because last year she had opened the door to a stranger, someone who claimed to need help. By morning, her grandmother's jewelry and her savings were gone. The police didn't solve a thing. The insurance didn't pay a dime. Since then, she'd promised herself that her door stayed closed, always. But then a sound cut through her fear, a thin, rattling cough, a child's cough. Kesha hesitated. She crept toward the frost-blurred window and wiped a small patch with her sleeve. Outside, illuminated by the weak porch light and swirling snow, stood a man hunched over, cradling a small girl in his arms. Her face was pale, her head heavy against his shoulder. "Ma'am, please!" the man called, his voice cracking. "My daughter, she's burning up. I don't know what else to do." The storm howled. The girl coughed again, weaker this time. Kesha squeezed her eyes shut, torn between terror and compassion. Her grandmother's voice floated back to her. "Baby, when someone needs help, and you can give it, you give it." Her hand trembled as she reached for the deadbolt. Every warning screamed at her to stop. Every memory of betrayal begged her to walk away. But something deeper wouldn't let her. With a shaking breath, she unlocked the door and pulled it open. The cold hit her like a wave. The man stumbled inside, snow clinging to his hair and coat, the child limp in his arms. "Thank you," he gasped. Kesha kept the poker raised, her heart racing. "You step inside," she warned, "but you try anything, I swear I won't hesitate." He nodded, exhausted. "I just need her to be safe." The girl whimpered softly. And just like that, the night changed everything. But as the storm raged and Kesha let the strangers inside, she had no idea. This man was hiding a truth that would shatter every assumption she ever had. The warmth of the cabin felt like a blessing compared to the brutal cold outside, but tension filled the air. Kesha stepped back just enough to let the man inside, never lowering the poker completely. The stranger's boots left wet prints on the wooden floor as he crossed the room with careful, protective steps, lowering the little girl onto the couch closest to the fire. She was shivering, small hands balled into fists, cheeks flushed with fever. Kesha swallowed hard. Fear aside, no one with a heart could ignore a child in this condition. The man removed his snow-soaked jacket, revealing arms trembling from exhaustion and cold. He rubbed his numb fingers together before glancing at Kesha with cautious eyes. "My name's Ray," he said, his voice rough from the cold. "This is my daughter, Zara." Kesha didn't soften. Not yet, not after what happened before. "Names don't mean much to me right now," she answered, her tone firm. "I need to know you're not here to cause trouble." Ray shook his head instantly. "I'm not. I swear. We were driving to Riverside. Her grandmother's been sick. I tried to beat the storm, but the road conditions—" He exhaled shakily. "We slid off into a ditch. My phone died. No signal anyway. I just kept walking toward the closest house I could find." Kesha studied him closely. His hands were cracked from the cold. His clothes were too thin for such a storm. His eyes held genuine fear. Not the kind a liar fakes, but the kind only a desperate parent knows. Still, she wasn't ready to trust. She set the poker down only slightly. "I have towels," she said cautiously. "Stay there." She kept her gaze locked on Ray as she backed away to the linen closet. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Her mind was racing through every possibility. Was he lying? Was this a setup? Or was this truly just a father trying to save his child? When she returned with towels, she placed them on the arm of the couch, deliberately out of his immediate reach. "Slowly," she instructed. Ray nodded and reached for a towel with gentle, deliberate movements. He began drying Zara's hair, whispering something soft and soothing to her. As he worked, Kesha noticed the tenderness in every touch. The way he paused every few seconds to check her breathing, the way his shoulders sagged with worry. No con artist acted like that. "Her fever's high," Kesha said quietly. "I can heat some soup. It might help." Ray looked up, eyes tired but grateful. "Thank you. Truly." Kesha walked to the kitchen, but she angled her body so she could still see them. She poured canned soup into a small pot, stirring slowly while watching Ray place a blanket over his daughter, tucking it around her with careful hands. The fire crackled. The storm raged outside, but inside, the three of them were cocooned in an uneasy, fragile stillness. Kesha didn't trust him yet, but something in the room had shifted, something subtle, something dangerous, something human. As the night stretched on and the storm grew worse, Kesha would soon learn that this stranger carried more secrets than she ever imagined, and one of them was about to change her life forever. The storm outside showed no mercy. Snow crashed against the windows in sheets, the wind howling like a warning neither of them could ignore. The power flickered again, then steadied, leaving the cabin dim except for the glow from the fireplace and two emergency candles Kesha had lit earlier. Zara stirred on the couch, her small body curling closer to the warmth. Ray hovered protectively beside her, rubbing warmth into her cold fingers. Kesha returned from the kitchen with two steaming mugs, one for Zara, one for Ray. "It's chicken noodle," she said, setting them down carefully. "Might help her breathe easier." Ray offered a grateful nod, lifting the mug to help Zara sip. The girl's eyes fluttered open for a moment, glassy with fever, but she managed a weak swallow. Kesha knelt beside her and pressed the back of her hand to the girl's forehead. Still warm. Too warm. "You walked a long way, didn't you?" Kesha asked softly. Ray nodded. "Almost an hour. I kept praying we'd find a house before she got worse." He hesitated, voice cracking. "I didn't know what else to do." Kesha's chest tightened. Even if she didn't trust him completely, she couldn't deny the sincerity behind his fear. A parent's fear. She sat back in her chair, letting the poker lean against the armrest instead of gripping it like a weapon. She wasn't relaxed, but she wasn't in fight or flight mode anymore. For several minutes, the only sounds were the crackling fire and Zara's soft breathing. Then Kesha finally asked, "Why risk a trip in a storm like this?" Ray stared into the mug he hadn't touched. "Zara's grandmother. Her heart's getting worse." He swallowed hard. Zara wanted to see her before things change. Kesha's breath caught. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Family slipping away is—" Her voice faded. "I know how that feels." Ray looked up. "You do?" "Lost my father 5 years ago," she said quietly. "Heart attack, 1 minute here, next minute." She snapped her fingers softly. "Gone." The pain in her voice seemed to connect something between them. An unspoken understanding only people who'd lost someone could share. "I'm sorry," Ray whispered. Kesha shrugged lightly, though the ache still lived under her ribs. "You learn to live around the empty spaces." Ray nodded. "I've been doing that since Zara's mother passed." That surprised her. Kesha's eyes lifted sharply. "Her mother—" "Cancer," he said simply. 2 years ago. A shadow of grief flickered across his face, real, raw, not rehearsed. Suddenly, the guarded woman who didn't trust strangers felt a quiet shift inside. Something softening, something reluctant, but human. She looked at Zara. She's lucky to have you. Ray chuckled faintly. I don't always feel like enough. You're here, Kesha replied. That counts. Silence fell again. Gentler this time, warmer. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the walls separating fear and trust thinned, just a little. Kesha didn't know it yet, but the night was far from done unraveling its secrets. But before dawn came, something would happen. Something that would force Kesha to see this stranger in a way she never expected, and test whether she should have opened that door at all. Hours crept by as the storm piled snow higher against the cabin walls. The air inside had warmed, but the tension between Kesha and Ray hadn't fully thawed. Kesha sat in her father's old armchair, wrapped in a blanket, eyes fixed on the strangers she had let inside her home, one cautious breath at a time. Zara slept soundly now, her fever breaking just enough to ease the worry etched on her father's face. Ray sat beside her on the couch, his shoulders slumped from exhaustion, his hands still trembling from cold and nerves. Kesha stood and quietly disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she carried something folded in her arms, soft, colorful, and worn with time. A quilt. Not just any quilt, but her grandmother's. Ray blinked in surprise. You sure? Kesha hesitated, fingers brushing the familiar fabric. She made this by hand, she said quietly. Old dresses, church clothes, pieces of our family stitched together. Her throat tightened. It's one of the last things I've got from her. Ray's brows pulled together. Kesha, I really don't think we should. She needs it, Kesha said more firmly, nodding toward Zara. Cold air settles hard on sick lungs. This keeps heat in. Ray accepted the quilt with both hands, slowly, like he understood the weight of the gesture. Thank you, he whispered. I mean that. Their eyes met, and for the first time since he'd stepped through her door, there wasn't fear between them. Only two people who had been hurt, who knew what it meant to lose, and who were trying, in this strange night, to trust again. Kesha settled back in the armchair, fatigue pulling her down. She tried to stay awake, tried to keep watch, but her eyes grew heavy. The last thing she heard was Ray humming softly to his daughter. A lullaby, gentle and familiar. Something about angels and morning light. Her father used to hum the same tune. That thought drifted with her into sleep. Kesha awoke to the faint clatter of dishes. Disoriented, she blinked against the hazy morning light spilling through the frosted windows. The storm had passed, leaving a thick white silence blanketing the world outside. Ray was in her kitchen. Morning, he said softly, holding a steaming mug. I didn't want to wake you, just thought, after everything, I could at least make coffee. He'd washed last night's dishes, folded the towels, straightened the living room. He hadn't touched anything else, and he hadn't left. Where'd you find the coffee? She asked suspiciously. He smiled sheepishly. Cabinet above the machine. Lucky guess. Kesha took the mug, letting the warmth settle into her hands. He had made it exactly how she liked it. Strong with just a little sugar. Observant. Thoughtful. Careful. It was the first moment she felt the smallest pull of trust, but that fragile piece wouldn't last. Because when she looked out the window, really looked, her stomach dropped. They were snowed in, completely. And Ray's face told her he already knew. But being trapped together was only the beginning. Because soon, Kesha would discover something about this stranger that would shake the fragile safety of her small home. And her heart. Snow stretched across the yard like a frozen ocean, burying the front steps and swallowing the driveway in drifts taller than a grown man. Kesha stood at the window, mug in hand, her breath fogging the glass as she stared at the white wall trapping them inside. Lord have mercy, she whispered. Ray joined her, rubbing the back of his neck. The roads will be closed for a while, maybe all day, maybe longer. Her grip tightened around the mug. She didn't like feeling trapped, Not after what she'd lived through, not after the break-in years ago. No exits, no options, a stranger under her roof. Her pulse quickened just thinking about it. "Don't worry," Ray said gently. "I'll shovel what I can once Zara wakes up." "That might take hours," Kesha replied, worry creeping into her tone. "And she's still weak." Ray nodded, glancing back toward the couch where Zara lay resting under the handmade quilt. "She's better, but not strong enough yet." Kesha sighed, wrapping her arms around herself. "Looks like we're stuck together." Ray offered a quiet smile. "Could be worse. You saved us. I'm grateful." She didn't answer, but something in her chest softened. Just a little. As the morning settled in, Ray started a fire while Kesha prepared a simple breakfast. The kitchen filled with the familiar smells of eggs and toast, and for a fleeting moment, it felt almost like a normal morning. Quiet, warm, safe. Zara stirred awake, her fever finally easing. Kesha brought her a small plate of toast cut into tiny squares. "Thank you," the girl whispered, voice raspy but sincere. "You're welcome, baby," Kesha replied with a kind smile. "You scared us last night." Ray watched the two of them with an expression Kesha couldn't quite place. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper, something she didn't trust herself to name. After breakfast, Kesha handed Ray an old pair of boots her nephew had left years ago, and a shovel from the shed. "If you're going out there, at least take these." Ray chuckled. "You're really giving me the good treatment." "You're borrowing," she corrected, crossing her arms. "I expect them back." He saluted jokingly. "Yes, ma'am." She rolled her eyes, but she couldn't hide the hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Ray opened the front door, bracing himself against the cold blast of air. "I'll be back in a bit," he said, stepping outside and closing the door behind him. The cabin fell quiet. Kesha moved to the window and watched him begin clearing the steps. Slow, heavy shovels slicing through ice-packed snow. But as she watched, something caught her eye. Ray paused mid-shovel, wincing, his hand pressed to his ribs as if swallowing a sharp pain. She frowned. That wasn't exhaustion. That was injury. And he was hiding it. Her hand tightened around the curtain. "What else," she whispered to herself, "is he keeping from me?" Because before the morning was over, Kesha would learn the truth behind Ray's pain. And it wasn't just physical. It was a secret far bigger, far heavier, and far more dangerous than she could imagine. Kesha couldn't ignore what she saw, Ray gripping his side, his face tightening as he tried to pretend nothing was wrong. The snow outside was deep, but not deep enough to hide pain like that. And pain doesn't lie. Pain reveals what a person tries hardest to hide. She stepped back from the window, her heartbeat picking up again, that old survival instinct whispering warnings she didn't want to hear. What if he wasn't as harmless as he seemed? What if she had let danger into her home again? She glanced toward the couch where Zara was resting. The little girl looked fragile, but peaceful. No child could fake that kind of exhaustion. No child could fake fever. Whatever Ray was hiding, it wasn't about her. Still, the thought gnawed at her. Kesha pulled on her coat, stepped onto the porch, and called out, "Ray, you need a break!" He didn't turn. Instead, he kept shoveling, his breath coming out in visible puffs, every movement slower than the last. "Ray!" she called louder. "I'm serious. Come inside before you hurt yourself." This time he paused. He stood there, shoulders rising and falling, trying to catch his breath. After several seconds, he turned toward her with a strained smile. "I'm almost done," he said. But he winced again, his hand drifting to his ribs before he pulled it away quickly, as if hoping she didn't notice. But Kesha noticed everything. She walked toward him, boots crunching in the snow. "What's wrong with your side?" "Nothing. Too fast, too rehearsed." "Ray," she said flatly. He sighed, finally letting the shovel drop. "It's just bruised from the car sliding." Kesha crossed her arms. "Bruised doesn't make a grown man flinch like someone stabbed him." There was a long pause. Snowflakes drifted between them like tiny white secrets. "It's fine," he murmured. "No, it ain't," she insisted. "Lift your jacket." Ray stiffened. "I don't want Zara to—" "She's sleeping," Kesha cut in. "Lift it." Ray hesitated, truly hesitated. Then, slowly, he lifted his jacket and sweater just enough for her to see. A deep, purple-black bruise spread across his ribs like spilled ink. Ugly, dangerous looking. Not the kind you walk off. Keisha's breath hitched. "Lord Ray, that's not from sliding in a ditch." He said nothing. Keisha stepped back, the cold suddenly sharper against her skin. "What happened to you?" Ray looked down at the snow, defeated. "It's complicated." "Try me." He swallowed hard, pain flickering across his face. Not just physical pain, but the kind that comes from carrying a truth too heavy for too long. "Someone ran us off the road," he finally whispered. "On purpose." Keisha's blood froze colder than the snow beneath her boots. Someone wanted this man and his daughter hurt, or worse. And before the day ended, Keisha would find out exactly why someone was after him, and why bringing him into her home wasn't just an act of kindness, but a step straight into danger. Keisha stared at Ray, her breath catching in her throat as his words settled like ice in her bones. Someone ran them off the road, on purpose. Her first instinct was denial. It was easier, safer, but the bruise on his ribs, the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear he tried so hard to hide. None of that looked like an accident. "Ray, who would do that?" she asked carefully, her voice barely above a whisper. Ray leaned on the shovel for support, the weight of the truth bowing his shoulders. "I was hoping you wouldn't ask." "That's not an answer," she pressed. He sighed, snowflakes collecting in his hair. "It was dark, and the roads were bad. At first I thought it was just someone who lost control, but then their headlights stayed on us. They followed every turn. And when we hit that corner near the ridge..." He paused. "They didn't slow down." Keisha felt her stomach twist. "You're telling me someone tried to hurt you with your child in the car?" Ray closed his eyes briefly. "That's exactly what I'm saying." The wind picked up, swirling snow between them. Keisha took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Why? Why would somebody go after you?" Ray looked away, jaw tightening. "It's complicated." "You keep saying that," she said, frustration creeping in. "But I've got a child in my house now, and if someone dangerous is after you..." "They're not coming here," Ray cut in sharply, then softened. "Keisha, I swear to you, they don't know where we are." Keisha folded her arms tightly across her chest. "You can't promise that." "I wouldn't have come near your home if I thought we were being followed." That part rang true. She believed he wouldn't willingly put her, or Zara, in danger. But the rest? The unanswered questions? The secrets hiding behind his tired eyes? Those were harder to trust. "Is this about money?" she asked quietly. "Debt? Trouble with the wrong people?" Ray almost chuckled. Almost. "No, not debt." "Then what?" Ray hesitated, choosing each word with painful precision. "There are people who don't like me, people who think I made decisions they didn't agree with, people who want control." Keisha frowned. "Control of what?" Ray's breath fogged in the cold air as he held her gaze. "Everything," he said simply. It wasn't an arrogant statement. It wasn't even dramatic. It was the tone, a quiet truth spoken by someone who'd lived in a world she couldn't yet see. A world that suddenly felt too close to her front porch. Keisha took a small step back. "Ray, what exactly do you do?" Ray opened his mouth to respond, but the cabin door creaked open behind them. Zara stood there, wrapped in the quilt, her voice weak but urgent. "Daddy, someone's calling your phone." Keisha and Ray exchanged a look, fear flashing between them. Ray didn't have service. He didn't have battery. His phone shouldn't even be on. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. When Ray answered that mysterious call, Keisha would finally learn the first shocking piece of the truth, and realize the man she sheltered was far more important and far more endangered than she ever imagined. Ray moved toward the cabin door so quickly that Keisha barely had time to follow. Zara held out the phone with both hands, her small fingers trembling, not from fever this time, but from something she didn't understand yet. The screen glowed faintly, a soft blue light in the dim cabin. Kesha's heart pounded. His phone shouldn't have been on. There had been no signal last night. The battery had been dead. She had watched him try and fail to turn it on. Ray took the phone from Zara, his jaw tightening. "Sweetheart, go sit down. I'll be there in a second." Zara obeyed, curling up on the couch again with the quilt wrapped around her. Kesha hovered close, unable to hide her anxiety. "Who's calling you?" Ray didn't answer. He just stared at the screen for a long, breathless moment before finally hitting accept. He put the phone to his ear. "Raymond," a smooth voice said on the other end, a voice too calm, too sure, too familiar. "You should have arrived hours ago. Where are you?" Keisha felt a shiver run down her spine at the tone. Ray swallowed. "How did you get this number?" "You gave it to me," the voice replied, "when we started this project, remember?" Ray pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose, already exhausted. "You were supposed to wait until tomorrow." "We have a problem," the voice said, cutting through him like a blade. "Someone leaked the bid negotiations, and I need you here, now." Kesha blinked. Bid? Negotiations? What kind of job had this man? Ray's shoulders slumped slightly. "We're snowed in," he said. "The storm blocked every road out of here. I have my daughter with me and she's sick. I'm not leaving until she's safe." The person on the other end scoffed. "You and your soft heart, Raymond, always letting personal matters interfere with business." Ray's expression hardened. "Zara is not a personal matter. She is my daughter." There was a long, dangerous pause on the line. Then the voice spoke again, colder than the snow outside. "You know what's at stake. If you aren't here soon, you may lose more than a contract." Ray clenched his jaw. "Is that a threat?" "It's a reminder." The line went dead. Ray lowered the phone slowly, his hand shaking. Kesha stared at him, speechless. "Raymond, who talks to someone like that? What kind of job do you have?" Ray looked at her, really looked at her, as if deciding whether to let her all the way into the truth, or keep her in the dark a little longer. Finally, he exhaled. "Kesha, I'm not who you think I am." Her breath caught. "Then who are you?" Ray's next words changed everything. "I run a company, a big one, and someone inside it wants me gone." But the real shock was still coming, because in the next moments, Kesha would discover just how big Ray's world truly was, and how dangerous stepping into it could be. Kesha felt her breath hitch as Ray's confessions settled in the air like dust after an explosion. "You run a company?" she repeated, trying to wrap her mind around it. "Like a store? A business?" Ray let out a humorless laugh. "Not exactly." Kesha crossed her arms. "Then explain it to me, because someone just threatened you over the phone, and I need to know what kind of mess I'm caught up in." Ray rubbed the side of his face, looking older than he had the night before. "My family built a corporation decades ago. Technology, real estate, medical supply chains, you name it. I didn't choose the life. I inherited it." Kesha's eyebrows drew together. "Inherited? Like, passed down?" "Yes." "So, you're not just a business owner?" Ray hesitated, then nodded once. "Kesha, I'm the CEO." Her mouth fell open. For a long moment she simply stared at him, her brain struggling to connect the dots. This was the man who had shown up at her door covered in snow, carrying a sick child, wearing a torn jacket and boots that looked 2 winters too old. "You?" she repeated incredulously. "You're a CEO." "A reluctant one," Ray said. "I stepped in only after my father passed. The board insisted. I tried to run things differently, more ethically. Not everyone liked that." Pieces clicked in Kesha's mind like tumbling dominoes. "The people who ran you off the road," she whispered. "They're connected to your company." Ray nodded grimly. "They want me out of the way before a major acquisition goes public. Billions of dollars are on the line." Kesha's eyes widened. "Billions?" Ray didn't flinch. "Yes." Her stomach twisted. She pressed a hand against the wall to steady herself. "And you walked to my house? In a snowstorm? Instead of calling, what do rich folks call them, security teams or drivers or... I didn't have a choice, Ray said quickly. When we were pushed off the road, my phone cracked, the battery drained. Zara hit her head. All I cared about was getting her warm, getting her safe. Kesha stared at him, and slowly her anger softened. Not gone, but shifting, reshaping itself. You should have told me sooner, she said softly. I know, he replied, but you already didn't trust me. And this, he gestured vaguely, this makes everything worse. Kesha exhaled. I don't care about the money, I don't care about who you are in some business suit, but I do care about that little girl. She glanced at Zara sleeping peacefully. And it sounds like the trouble following you might not be done. Ray's shoulders slumped. It isn't! Kesha took a step closer, her voice firm. Then you need to tell me everything. No more secrets, Ray. If danger's coming here, I need the truth. Ray lifted his eyes, something heavy sitting behind them. Kesha, the person behind all this isn't just someone on the board. He paused. It's someone from my family. Kesha's blood ran cold. Family. The richest, most dangerous betrayals always started at home. And before the truth came out, Kesha would learn just how far that family betrayal reached, and how it was about to put all three of them in even greater danger. For a long moment, the only sound inside the cabin was the low crackling of the fire. Kesha stood frozen, her breath shallow, trying to make sense of Ray's words. Someone from his family had tried to force him off the road. She lowered herself slowly into the armchair, never taking her eyes off him. Ray, what do you mean, someone from your family? Ray leaned against the table, rubbing his temples as if bracing himself. My father left the company to me, but not everyone accepted that decision. My cousin, Elias, believes the company should have been his. He's always been ambitious, ruthless even. And when I tried to change the company's direction, he saw it as me destroying what he felt should be his legacy. Kesha frowned. So he, sent people after you? Ray exhaled sharply. He wouldn't put it that plainly. He hides behind lawyers and advisors. But every time something goes wrong, security breaches, sabotage, deals falling apart, he's always at the center of it, pretending he's on the sidelines. And last night? Kesha asked. Ray's jaw tightened. I recognized the car that forced us off the road. It belonged to a private team he hired earlier this year under the excuse of company security. I knew then that this wasn't business, this was personal. Kesha shook her head slowly, struggling to align this revelation with the man standing in her living room, in borrowed boots and a torn jacket. So you came here because you were scared for Zara? Ray nodded. Elias isn't reckless enough to harm a child. Not intentionally. But people who work for him, they don't always care who gets hurt. If they thought I was headed to the negotiation site to stop his takeover, they would have done whatever it took to slow me down. Kesha felt a pressure building in her chest. This is too big, Ray. This isn't just some argument between cousins. People who fight over money, especially this kind of money, they don't just stop. I know, Ray whispered. That's why I didn't want to involve you. Kesha stood, her voice firm. You didn't involve me. That storm did. Fate did. Whatever you want to call it, y'all are here now. And until the road's clear, we deal with this as it comes. Ray looked at her with something like gratitude and something like guilt. You're braver than you think, Kesha, he said softly. She folded her arms. Brave? No, just practical. A child's safety comes first. Yours too, even if you make questionable decisions. He managed a tired smile. Fair enough. But the moment of calm shattered when Zara suddenly whimpered in her sleep, her tiny body curling tighter under the quilt. Kesha moved toward her. Zara, sweetheart? Zara's face twisted, her breathing quickening. Ray rushed beside her. She's burning up again. Kesha's heart jolted. Ray, she needs a doctor. I know, he whispered, panic creeping in. But we're still snowed in. Kesha grabbed her coat. Then we find a way. But when she opened the door, she froze. Fresh tire tracks, deep ones, cut across the snow. Someone had arrived, or someone was watching. Because the moment Kesha stepped outside, she was about to discover she wasn't alone, and the visitor waiting in the snow wasn't there by accident. The cold hit Kesha immediately as she stepped outside, sharp, biting, unforgiving. But it wasn't the cold that made her breath stutter. It was the tracks. Deep grooves cut across the snow, leading straight toward the tree line, then disappearing behind a drift. Not old tracks, fresh. Made not long before she opened the door. Her heart thudded hard against her ribs. Someone had been here, watching, maybe listening, maybe waiting. She scanned the quiet landscape, the heavy snow-laden branches, the long shadows stretching across the yard. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed except the wind whispering over the white blanket of earth. She took a cautious step forward, her boots crunching softly. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice sounded small, far too small for the vast stillness around her. No answer. Behind her, Ray appeared in the doorway, clutching his side but alert. "Keisha? What is it?" She pointed at the tracks. "Someone was here." Ray stared, jaw tightening. "Those aren't from last night." "The snow would have covered them." "That's what I'm saying," she replied, her voice dropping. "These are new." Ray stepped outside despite his injury, squinting toward the woods. This wasn't random. Someone found us. Fear prickled up Keisha's spine. "Ray, could it be those people from the road?" "It might be." His voice carried a tension she hadn't heard before. Sharper, more urgent. "Elias has access to a private network of trackers, vehicles with satellite tracing. If they were following my car last night..." His sentence trailed off. Keisha filled in the rest. "They know exactly where we are." She swallowed hard and stepped back toward the cabin. "We need to get inside. Now." They moved quickly, closing the door behind them and locking both bolts. Ray pulled the curtains shut while Keisha checked the windows. Zara stirred uneasily on the couch, her fevered breaths coming in shallow waves. Ray knelt beside her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "We're okay," he murmured, though the tremor in his voice suggested he wasn't trying to reassure Zara. He was trying to reassure himself. Keisha grabbed the first aid kit from the shelf. "Her temperature's rising again. She needs medical help soon." Ray nodded, frustration etched across his face. "I know. I'm trying to..." A sudden vibration made them both jump. Ray's phone, his cracked phone, which shouldn't even have signal. The screen lit up with a new message. Keisha leaned over his shoulder as Ray opened it. Only one sentence appeared. "Stop running, Raymond. You're making this harder than it needs to be." A chill swept through the room. Someone wasn't just tracking him. Someone was toying with him. Ray's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "He found us." Keisha clenched her jaw. "Not if we move first." Ray turned toward her, startled. "Move in this weather, with Zara like this." Keisha met his gaze, her voice steady despite the fear tightening her chest. "If he knows where we are, then staying here is the real danger." Ray stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. He knew she was right. They didn't have a choice. Not anymore. But as they prepared to flee the cabin, Keisha would discover a clue, small, almost invisible, that revealed exactly how Ray's enemies found them, and it would change everything. Chaos surged beneath the surface of the small cabin as Ray and Keisha hurried to gather what little they needed. The storm had softened, leaving a faint hush in its wake, but the tension inside the walls felt louder than any blizzard. Zara lay bundled on the couch, cheeks flushed, breathing shallow. Keisha knelt beside her, brushing a hand across her forehead. "Hang on, baby. We're gonna get you help." Ray zipped up the coat Keisha had loaned him, wincing as the movement tugged at his bruised ribs. "We'll take the back path," he said quietly. "There's an old road beyond the tree line. If the snowplows came through, we might get far enough for signal." Keisha nodded, stuffing medical essentials and a few food items into a backpack. "We move together. No one gets left behind." But just as she reached for Zara's small boots near the fireplace, something unusual caught her eye. A faint, blinking light, barely noticeable, wedged between the firewood basket and the edge of the mantel. Her breath froze. "Keisha?" Ray asked, sensing the shift in her posture. She didn't answer. Instead, she crouched, pushing aside a few logs. And there, hidden under the kindling, was a small black device, no bigger than a matchbox, with a single blinking dot. A tracker. Her stomach turned. "Ray, look at this." Ray limped over, his face draining of color the moment he saw it. "No! No! No, this can't be!" Kesha's voice trembled with anger. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is." Ray took the device carefully from her hand, his fingertips shaking. "It's a satellite tracker," he whispered. "High grade, modern. Elias had his security teams equipped with these last year." Kesha's mind raced. "But how did it get in here? How would they know which house you went to? You were walking in a blizzard. There's no way they could have followed your footprints." Ray swallowed thickly. "I didn't bring this in." He paused. "Kesha, I checked my coat, my phone, everything. This wasn't on us." She stared at him. "Then someone placed it here, before you arrived." The realization hit like a cold wave. Someone had already been inside her cabin, recently, maybe even while she slept. Her skin prickled with fear. Ray examined the device, brows furrowing. "It's activated, meaning someone tracked the signal this morning. They know exactly where we are." Kesha felt her breath shorten. "We have to go now, before whoever planted it comes back." Ray nodded and moved toward Zara. "Help me get her ready." They bundled the little girl in layers, her quilt around her shoulders, her small boots secured, her hat pulled low. Kesha grabbed the keys to her old pickup truck, silently praying it would start after the storm. Ray looked at her with fierce determination. "We move fast, stay quiet and stay together." Kesha steadied herself. "We'll make it." But even as the words left her lips, doubt gnawed at her, because if someone had already been inside her home, they might not have left. And as Kesha opened the cabin door to flee, she would come face to face with something waiting in the snow. Something that proved escaping wouldn't be as simple as she hoped. Kesha braced herself as she pulled open the cabin door, expecting bitter cold and empty snow. Instead, she froze mid-step. Right in front of the cabin, half buried in the drift, sat a dark-colored SUV, its engine still ticking from recent use, steam rising faintly from the hood. Not covered in snow, not abandoned long ago, fresh, very fresh. Her heart lurched violently. Ray appeared behind her, clutching Zara close. The moment he saw the vehicle, his breath hitched. "That's not yours," Kesha interrupted, her voice tight. Ray shook his head slowly. "No, and that model, it's the same type Elias's private team uses." Kesha's stomach twisted. "Which means someone's out here, right now." She scanned the tree line, every shadow suddenly menacing, every gust of wind sounding like a footstep. The snow muffled everything, turning the world eerily quiet, too quiet. Ray pulled Kesha back into the cabin and shut the door, locking it with quick, shaking movements. "We don't know how many people are here," Ray whispered. "I need you to stay close." But Kesha was already moving. "Ray, they planted a tracker inside my house. They could have walked right in last night. They could have been watching us sleep." Her voice cracked, not from fear alone, but from the violation. Her home had always been her sanctuary. Now it felt compromised, tainted by someone else's presence. Ray placed a steadying hand on her arm. "We're getting out. But we need a plan," Kesha nodded, forcing herself to breathe. "We stick to the back path, no noise, no lights, move fast." Ray glanced at Zara, who lay wrapped in her quilt, cheeks flushed with fever. "She can't walk far." Kesha grabbed a thick scarf and tied it around her waist. "Then she stays bundled to me. You can barely breathe with those ribs." Ray looked guilty, but he didn't argue. As they prepared to slip out the back exit, a faint crunch echoed outside, the unmistakable sound of a boot pressing into snow. Kesha stiffened. Ray's eyes sharpened. Another crunch. Closer. Someone was circling the cabin. Kesha motioned to Ray, and he quickly extinguished the fire, plunging the cabin into a dim gray, lit only by the cloudy daylight filtering through the curtains. The world felt as though it held its breath. A shadow passed the frosted window. Long, patient, searching. Kesha swallowed hard. "We can't go out the back," she whispered. "They're surrounding the place." Ray's jaw clenched. "Then we wait for a chance." But Zara suddenly whimpered in her sleep, loudly. Ray froze. Kesha froze, and then a sharp knock at the front door, 3 slow, deliberate knocks, the kind that said, "I know you're in there." Kesha felt Ray's grip tighten around her hand. This wasn't random. This wasn't mistaken identity. They were found. For real. And when Kesha finally opened that door, she would face someone she never expected. Someone whose arrival shifted the danger in a direction none of them saw coming. The 3 deliberate knocks echoed through the small cabin like thunder. Slow, intentional, confident. Kesha's breath caught. Ray instinctively pulled Zara tighter against his chest, his entire body stiff with fear. Whoever stood on the other side of that door wasn't just passing through. They weren't lost. They weren't seeking help. They were here with purpose. Kesha raised a trembling finger to her lips. Don't move. The room fell still, deathly still. Another knock came, softer this time, like the person was growing impatient. Kesha, Ray whispered. Don't open it. She didn't plan to, not unless she had to. But something in the rhythm of that knock gnawed at her. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't the signature of someone ready to break in. It was familiar. A voice followed, muffled through the thick wooden door. Ma'am, it's the sheriff's department. I need to speak with whoever lives here. Kesha's heart stuttered. Law enforcement? Ray shook his head instantly, panic in his eyes. No, sheriff's department doesn't drive black SUVs like that, not out here. The voice called again, firmer. We had reports of a vehicle accident nearby, just making sure everyone's all right. Kesha wrapped her fingers around the edge of the counter for stability. Something wasn't right. Cops didn't knock like that. They didn't wander onto rural roads without backup, especially after a storm. And they sure didn't show up in tactical SUVs with tinted windows. Ray whispered sharply, Elias has people who impersonate officials. A chill slid down her spine. She stepped closer to the window, just enough to peek through the narrow slit in the curtain. A man stood on her porch wearing a sheriff's jacket. But the jacket was too clean, too new, and the badge wasn't local. The county name was wrong. Her stomach dropped. That's not our sheriff, she whispered. Ray's grip tightened around Zara. We don't open the door, no matter what he says. The fake officer knocked again, this time with a sharp edge in his tone. Ma'am, open up. We need to confirm everyone inside is safe. Safe. The word sounded like a threat. Kesha stepped forward, adrenaline rising. If he knows someone's inside, he's not leaving. Ray nodded. Then we have to stall, make him think we're not here. Before Kesha could answer, the man outside rattled the doorknob. Testing it. Her pulse spiked. Then came the scrape of boots on the porch. Another shadow joined the first. 2 of them now, maybe more behind the trees. Kesha forced Ray and Zara toward the back hallway. Get behind the pantry door. Stay quiet. Ray hesitated. What about you? She grabbed a heavy iron skillet from the counter. I'm buying us time. She moved to the front of the cabin, keeping low, heart hammering so loudly she feared they would hear it through the door. The fake officer spoke again, no warmth left in his voice. Last chance. Open the door, or we come in. Kesha raised the skillet, bracing herself, because one way or another, that door was about to open. But when the door finally burst open, the person who walked in wasn't who Kesha expected. Someone whose presence changed the course of everything. The doorknob rattled again, harder this time. Kesha tightened her grip on the iron skillet, her palms slick with fear. Her breath came shallow and fast as heavy boots shifted outside on the porch. Ray and Zara hid behind the pantry door, silent as shadows. 3, the fake officer growled. 2! Kesha braced herself. The door suddenly burst inward, wood splintering at the hinges as a shoulder rammed it hard enough to send cold air whipping through the cabin. The porch light flickered. Kesha swung the skillet with all her strength. It connected. Clang! But not with the man she expected. The figure stumbled back, hands raised in the air. Wait, stop! It's me! Kesha froze mid-swing. Standing in her destroyed doorway was Sheriff Matthews, her real sheriff, the same man who used to help her grandmother carry groceries from the old truck, the same man who'd lived in the county for 30 years. His brown uniform was dusted with snow, his breath clouding in the cold. Matthews? Kesha gasped, lowering the skillet. What on earth? Are you out of your mind, woman? He wheezed, rubbing his shoulder. You nearly cracked my skull. You kicked my door open. You weren't answering. They stared at each other, her shocked, him half-blinded by stars. But before either could speak again, Matthews lifted a shaking hand toward the trees. You've got trouble coming. Serious trouble. Kesha's stomach dropped. What kind? Matthews swallowed hard. 2 men in black SUVs flagged down my deputy on the main road asking about a lost vehicle. Their IDs were fake. Their story was fake. They said they were federal contractors, but their plates belonged to a private investor firm out of state. Ray's voice drifted from behind the pantry door. They're here for me. Matthews turned sharply, hand going to his holster. Raymond Caldwell? Ray stepped out with Zara in his arms, exhaustion etched into his face. Yes. And they're not here to talk. Matthews muttered something under his breath. The Caldwell name. I should have known this mess had your family's fingerprints all over it. Kesha blinked. Sheriff, we found a tracker hidden in my cabin. Someone was inside before we woke up. Matthews swore under his breath. They're not amateurs. And if they're circling this place, a sudden metallic click echoed from outside. Matthews's head snapped toward the sound. Inside, all of you, away from the windows. Ray shielded Zara as Kesha pulled the sheriff in and shoved a chair under what remained of the door. Matthews radioed for backup, but the static hissed uselessly. No signal through the mountains. Listen, Matthews said quickly, voice low and urgent. There's only one safe way out of here, and it ain't through the road. Ray met his eyes. Then where? Matthews pointed to the floorboards beneath the rug. The old storm cellar. It leads out to the creek bed. They don't know about it. Kesha placed a trembling hand over her mouth. She hadn't used that cellar in years. The sheriff crouched, pulling the rug aside. We move fast. Once they realize I'm here, they'll come hard. Then, a heavy, unmistakable silhouette passed the shattered doorway. Someone was already approaching, and as the first attacker stepped inside the cabin, Kesha would be forced to make a choice, one that would determine whether they survived the next few minutes, or didn't. The shadow stretched across the broken doorway, slow, steady, deliberate. Kesha's pulse hammered in her ears as the first attacker stepped inside, wearing the same dark tactical jacket she'd glimpsed earlier through the window. His face was hidden beneath a black winter mask, only his eyes visible, and those eyes swept the room with chilling precision. Matthews silently motioned everyone toward the storm cellar hatch, but Ray tightened his grip on Zara, frozen between fear and urgency. The intruder took another step, boots crunching over splintered wood. Kesha's breath caught. He hadn't seen them yet, not fully. Matthews leaned close to Kesha and whispered through clenched teeth. We move when he turns, but the man didn't turn. He listened, a predator pausing before the strike. From behind the pantry door, a faint sound escaped. Zara's small cough, weak, raspy, impossible to suppress. The intruder's head snapped toward the sound. Kesha's heart dropped. Go! Matthews hissed. Everything erupted at once. Kesha grabbed the storm cellar handle and yanked hard. The door creaked open, revealing the narrow wooden steps descending into darkness. Ray clutched Zara and hurried toward it while Matthews drew his weapon and shouted, Sheriff's Department! Drop it! The intruder didn't drop anything. He lunged. Matthews fired, a deafening crack slicing through the cabin. The attacker stumbled but didn't fall, propelled forward by adrenaline and intent. Kesha shoved Ray toward the cellar opening. Get her down there! Ray didn't argue. He descended quickly, shielding Zara with his body. Kesha grabbed a flashlight from the wall, her hands trembling as she prepared to follow. Matthews struggled with the intruder, the two men slamming into the kitchen table, sending dishes shattering across the floor. Kesha! Ray shouted from the cellar. Come on! Another shadow appeared in the doorway. A second attacker. Kesha's blood ran cold. Matthews saw him too. There's two! Move! The second man raised something, metal catching the faint light. A gun. Without thinking, Kesha hurled the flashlight at him. It hit his wrist with a sharp crack, just enough for the gun to clatter to the floor. He swore, lunging after her. Kesha, now! Ray's voice trembled with panic. She dove into the cellar, slamming the wooden hatch, just as a boot thudded against it from above. "Don't let go!" she screamed, bracing her weight against the hatch. Ray climbed back up 2 steps and pressed his shoulder into it beside her. Above them, fists pounded against the wood, voices yelled, the old hinges groaned under the force. Matthews's voice boomed through the chaos. "Run, you hear me? Run!" Kesha's throat tightened. "Sheriff! Go!" Ray grabbed her hand. "We have to move, Kesha. He's buying us time." The banging intensified. Ray tugged her into the dark tunnel. Kesha swallowed her fear, looked back once, and whispered, "God help you, Sheriff." Then she followed Ray into the pitch black, the sounds of the attackers tearing at the hatch fading behind them. But the terror wasn't behind them for long, because the storm cellar wasn't empty, and they weren't alone. As Kesha's flashlight flickered back to life, what she saw waiting deeper in the cellar would force her to confront a truth more shocking and more dangerous than any she had learned so far. The narrow cellar tunnel smelled of damp earth and cold stone. Kesha's boots splashed through shallow puddles as she followed Ray deeper into the darkness. Their breaths came fast, fogging in the frigid air. Behind them, faint thuds echoed, proof the attackers hadn't given up. Ray's voice was low and urgent. "Keep the light steady." Kesha's flashlight flickered weakly, its beam trembling over the old stone walls. "I'm trying," she whispered, gripping Zara tighter against her chest. The child was still half conscious, her small head resting against Kesha's shoulder. They continued deeper until the tunnel split into 2 narrow paths, both disappearing into darkness. Kesha froze. "Which way?" Ray swallowed. "The left path leads to the creek bed. Sheriff Matthews told me that years ago. He never thought it'd be used for something like this." Kesha nodded, adjusting Zara. "Then left it is." But as she turned, her flashlight flickered again, this time illuminating something on the ground. Footprints. Fresh ones, large, heavy, leading deeper into the same left tunnel they needed to take. Her blood ran cold. "Ray! Someone's already down here!" He stared at the prints, jaw tightening. "We don't have time to turn back. The cellar door won't hold forever." "I know," she whispered. They moved slowly, carefully, every sound amplified, drip of water, shuffle of feet, Ray's uneven breathing. Kesha's heart pounded so loudly she wondered if whoever was ahead could hear it. After several tense steps, a faint metallic clink echoed. Ray stopped abruptly, raising a hand. Silence. Then, a voice from the darkness, a low, familiar, chilling voice. "Well now, isn't this interesting?" Kesha's breath caught as a figure stepped into view. The flashlight's beam skimmed over a sharp, angular face, eyes cold, calculating. He wore a sleek winter coat and gloves far too refined for this environment. Ray's entire body stiffened. Elias. Elias's lips curled into a slow smile. "You've led me on quite a chase, cousin." Kesha tightened her hold on Zara, stepping back instinctively. Elias's gaze flicked to her. "Ah, and the woman who sheltered a fugitive billionaire. You have a talent for choosing the wrong company." Kesha glared. "You're the one sending thugs after your own family. Don't you dare talk about choices." Elias chuckled softly. "Family? Raymond forfeited that when he defied me. And now—" His expression hardened. "Now he's going to answer for it." Ray stepped in front of Kesha protectively. "You're not touching her, or Zara." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You think you can stop me?" Before Ray could respond, a sudden crack echoed through the tunnel. A warning shot, not from Elias, from behind him. Sheriff Matthews, bruised, limping, but alive, emerged from the darkness with his service weapon raised. Elias's eyes widened. "Step away from them," Matthews growled, voice like steel. "You're finished." Chaos erupted. Elias lunged toward Ray. Matthews fired again, forcing Elias to stumble back. Kesha sprinted toward the creek exit with Zara as Ray tackled Elias to the ground. "Go!" Ray shouted. "Kesha, run!" She hesitated, just for a moment, torn between fear and instinct. But then Ray met her eyes. "Take her to safety!" Kesha clutched Zara and ran toward the faint sliver of daylight ahead. Her legs trembled, lungs burning, but she didn't stop until she burst through the exit into the frozen creek bed. Behind her, Matthews dragged Ray out, both bruised but alive. Elias was nowhere to be seen, gone into the trees. The nightmare wasn't over, but they had survived the night. Ray collapsed to his knees in the snow, pulling Zara into his arms as Kesha knelt beside them, breathless, shaking, overwhelmed. "You saved us," Ray whispered, voice hoarse. Kesha looked at him, tears burning her eyes. "We saved each other." And for the first time since the storm began, she finally believed it. If this story touched your heart, don't leave just yet. Hit like to support the channel, subscribe so you never miss another story, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated whenever a new episode is posted. And if you have your own life lesson, twist of fate, or unforgettable encounter, share it in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story. Stay warm, stay safe, and stay kind.